Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Boy Manning here, and welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Garden Report. We are back at it here with Law Murray, frequent guest to the Garden Report, and we always appreciate him stopping by. And you wrote recently power rankings, which I always love and inspired me to do one of my own. And man, I'm just struggling to place the Celtics right now.
Yeah. Well, shout out to me getting frequent status. Like, I don't think that's the case in a lot of places. So
that doesn't happen, often here. So yeah, we love you over here, Law. We love having you. And I looked through your list, and I think we have a pretty similar list as we start to go through it here. It's hard not to put the Thunder one. And you went fewer tiers than me. I actually put them in the tiers today because I didn't put mine into tiers originally, and tiers actually help a lot because then you don't have to nitpick like I'm ranking one team over another. They're just in a group. And I had 8 tiers. You went with 5.
I'm always at so I've never did power rankings or expressed any interest in doing power rankings before. I actually never expressed interest in doing power rankings. Zach Harper did it at The Athletic for years. When I worked at ESPN, I didn't edit it. I was an editor there. Never expressed any interest in working with that stuff. I genuinely don't really look at power rankings like that. I think John Schumann at NBA.com is the GOAT of power rankings. Like, he does it the best. And I don't like doing anything that other people do. Like, I just don't like doing that. So I got to do my own thing. But when Zach decided he was going to step away, the company said they drafted me to do it, and they did it the very last minute. So, of course, I'm not doing power rankings until the season had already gotten underway. I had a bunch of people who are used to looking at the previous bartender serve the drinks, you know what I'm saying? So, like, it's like you can't change too much. I'm gonna serve you them 5 tiers, but I wanted to make those tiers mine. And then it's like, y'all gonna hate me this year, but hopefully y'all can, get over that and get me, I'll get you through the season. So I'm always going to, I want people to know that there's going to be some level of consistency, and that's where the tiers come from for me. You did your thing with tiers, and that meant that you got like I don't know how many you wound up putting, but it's like, dude, there's only 30 teams, man.
Well, I think there's a small tier at the top, which I think is fitting because I wouldn't call the Thunder a class of their own, and you clearly didn't either here. You had 5 teams in the top.
Gotta have 5.
Tier,
gotta have a top 5.
I think I think there's a case. I'd probably put 4 max in a top tier. I went with 2, just because there were 2 teams that looked like they were capable of being the Thunder last year. 3, obviously, if you include the Celtics, they're out of it. The Pacers are out of it right now, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But there was only one team to me that legitimately threatened the Thunder last year, and actually looks like they can legitimately threaten the Thunder to start this year. And it's the Nuggets, and they are in your tier 1 as well. But they're the only team, and obviously only 4 teams got the opportunity to in a series, but they're one of 2 teams that pushed the Thunder to the brink last year. And that's why I don't think the Thunder are deserving of being in a tier of their own. They're pretty close when you just think of all the guys that are coming back, what they did last year, how dominant they were last year. But I don't think there's a big amount of teams that could threaten them. So I went with 2 teams in tier 1. I think the Nuggets are there just because as I look at the field right here, right now I only see one team that can push them.
The Nuggets are there because of 2 things. 1, because of that playoff series, and 2, because of Nikola Jokic. But the reality is the Nuggets were a game away from not even getting to that series against the Thunder. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, and that's how my tiers have 2 Eastern Conference teams at the top. And the reality is, I feel like the Knicks are going to, they have a chance to be better next year, which, like, that's what a new coach does. And look no further than the team that was one in the East last year, the Cleveland Cavaliers, as an example of that. Like, not just JB Bickerstaff is not a bad coach. Look at what JB did in Detroit. But sometimes a coach is better for a group of guys in the short term, and that plays out in year one. And that's what the Knicks have to look forward to next year. And that's what the Cavs got to benefit from last year, like,
Yeah. I have the
and
Knicks 4, so we're in the same ballpark with them. I think they're going to be the best team in the East next year. Just with the continuity, adding a couple pieces on the bench. I love Yabusele there. And it'll be interesting to see how he plays with expectations because there weren't a lot of them in Philly. He got to play pretty free. But I
yeah,
like that addition. I like Mitchell Robinson being healthy to start the year, and I like the coach a
there's
lot.
there's expectations, but there's also desperation. Because if Yabu failed last year, he's probably back
He's
in
done.
France.
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean? Like, so there's a mixture of that. That it's not like that dude was coming in as a complete unknown. Like, that was a former first round pick by Boston,
By Boston.
and a coveted one too. Like, Boston had to take him where they took him because there were other teams, the Clippers, for example, back in, I believe that was 2016 draft, that were interested in a player like him, and so, like, and that's with the knowledge of him being a drafting stash. Like, Yabu didn't come to Boston right away. He spent a year stash before Boston actually wound up bringing him over. So I like the Knicks as far as them being a more dynamic regular season team. And the thing in the playoffs is, like, you got to look at these rankings as almost like 2 rankings. I'm not looking at the playoffs heavily. I'm not making predictions as to who I think is winning the title or who will be in the finals, or because the playoffs are just unpredictable, but they're also unpredictable in terms of, if you're in the East, you shouldn't be looking at the West.
Yep.
You have 3 teams in your own conference that you're going to have to eliminate just to get the opportunity to meet one team in the other conference. You don't look, unless you're doing that Celtics Lakers bullshit from the 80s. It's like, the Lakers. The Lakers had the sorriest Western Conferences year in and year out. That's why they knew they were going to face the Celtics as many times as they did in the finals. Because look at the jokers that they had to worry about in the West. The 1980s Western Conference is how a lot of y'all look at the Eastern Conference today, So it's like, if you're in the East, if you're at the top of the East, you're in a pretty damn secure position.
It's a
if
golden
you're
opportunity
good.
for those couple teams. Yeah, so we're talking
Exactly.
Knicks, we're talking Cavs, who I have some concerns about the Cavs just because they've been doing this thing for a couple years from now. And on one hand,
Doing
you
what?
can say
Doing what for a couple years?
running this roster back. And on one hand, you can say there's a much less resistance to them getting where they want to go this year, and this is a big break for them. On the other hand, you can say they've slipped up so many times in the playoffs now. Do you actually believe in what they're doing at this point? And the one big thing for me that makes me worried about them is the Garland thing. Him starting the year injured. I hope he can make it through this year healthy and not have to deal with a lot of stuff like he did a couple of years ago, because he was great last year. And then playoffs come around and a couple of their guys just seem to slip up in those situations. I love their roster. I love the season they had last year. I love the coach. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're that last team standing, just because the Celtics are out of the picture and the Pacers who beat them last year, and there's just less resistance this time around. But they haven't even gotten to the conference finals with this group. And sometimes,
you could have said the same thing about the Knicks before last year.
Yeah.
That's why I'm encouraged. Like, I would have.
But they
put
shook
the
it up
Cavs
a little. They traded Randall for Towns.
Yeah. Like, I would have put the Cavaliers over the Knicks, but they already do have a guy who's not going to be ready to start the season. So I think that allows the Knicks to possibly get an advantage that they honestly like. The Knicks are just the strongest team left. Like if you look at the top 5 in the Eastern Conference, the Knicks are the only ones that can feel like, yeah, our roster is going to hold up because we haven't lost anybody. Boston lost Tatum. The Pacers lost Halliburton. The Bucks lost Lillard. And then you've got, you got the Knicks there, and they just changed coaches. But as of today, the Knicks are healthy. And health is an outlier. I've made this point to people. I don't like talking about, like if you're perfectly healthy, this is what it's like. No, that's playoff talk. And even in the playoffs, like you have to prepare for when you're shorthanded, if you get shorthanded, and you get that in a regular season where nobody's fully healthy. Okay. Like it's an outlier if your top 8 guys all play 70 games. That's the outlier team. You got 25 teams that'll look and be like, well, we would have been better if we were healthy. Okay, you and 20 other jokers.
So that's why when we get to some of the other teams we have in the mix here, I do want to talk Minnesota versus Houston because I think that was an early split point we had. I'm so high on Houston, and they slipped up in that series. It was disappointing to see them lose to Golden State because I thought they should have won that series.
They lost in the most predictable way too.
Yeah. So the offense is there's a couple. I'm a defensive guy, and you're going to see it in my rankings here. I got Houston 3. I think they're going to be the best defense in the league this year. I think what they have and what they can utilize and the coaching staff they have is so well positioned to just dominate on that end of the floor. And I love Durant here for a couple of reasons. They needed someone who can take the shots late in games. He's well equipped to do that. He doesn't have to play a ton of interior defense. In fact, you could probably just float him off a guy, and have the Şengüns and Adams of the world guard bigger bodies. So I love his role defensively for them too. I don't think it's going to put a lot of pressure on him. And then you just added so much depth here. And to your point, who can sustain injuries? Adams goes down. You got Clint Capella. One of the guards is out. You got Aaron Holiday. You got all of these different depth role players here. Durant, has to miss a game or two here or there. You got Van Fleet who can step back into that lead role. Like there's just so much interchangeability with this roster. It's staggering how much depth they've put together. And then if you go away from that double big thing that they like to do, you got the Eason, Smith, Thompson stuff you can do on the perimeter. You can just run some devastating defensive lineups here. And then on top of all of that, I feel like we haven't even seen Şengün scratch the surface of what he's capable of. And I think there's so much less pressure on him now to run this offense every single possession. So I put them in close to the best in my second tier. And to me, that's not a team that I see making the finals. And I feel the same way about the Knicks and Cavs here. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I know you're high on the Wolves here based on your rankings. I'd be surprised if the Wolves make the finals, just based on what we've watched the last couple of years.
To be really honest with you, I'm not high on anybody. I'm high on the Thunder, and everybody else I think has,
And I'm just such an email guy, by the way.
Yeah, like my whole thing with Minnesota is we talk about the Western Conference all the time, and then we dismiss the team that actually made back-to-back West Finals. So like, and that
would they lose 4-1 this year and 4?
Yeah, they have only won 2 games in those 2 conference finals appearances, but just getting to those conference finals were accomplishments in itself. The fact that they did it back-to-back years, the fact that they did it in between a trade. The Knicks didn't do that. The Knicks got there last year, but they didn't get there the year before, Like,
and the Wolves did it as what,
the 6th seed? Towns. Last year they were the 6. That means that, they won a playoff series without having home court advantage, and then they beat the Warriors. And I think the thing with the Wolves is they played unserious basketball for most of last season. They didn't start tightening up and playing better basketball until Julius Randle got back from injury. I think a lot of people are looking at Nickeil Alexander-Walker's departure as if it's something that's going to break the Timberwolves. Nickeil wasn't even their best guard off the bench last year on that team. They got multiple guys who should be able to take, an opportunity.
I like Terrence Shannon. They need a point guard.
Exactly.
As Conley starts to get in the late stages here. It's amazing how little depth they have there, especially if Dillingham doesn't pop the way they think
Well,
he might.
that's the key. Dillingham is to Minnesota what Reed Shepard is to Houston. You mentioned Aaron
Yep.
Holiday. The Rockets didn't trust Aaron Holiday in the playoffs last year. What makes you think you're going to trust him
They didn't
now?
trust Reed Shepard all year, though.
They didn't trust Reed Shepard all year. That's another reason why I don't think the Rockets have the depth that they're going to need if they're going to do what they need to do in the spring. That's what the trade deadline is for. The trade deadline exists to make you forget about all this talk that we're going to have over the summer going into the season. It's going to be like in the offseason, you make your moves and then you go up there as if you won a damn Academy Award, because the agents made sure to get their guy a contract. But like when the losses come up, you're not going to hear anything from those same agents except my guy needs to be traded. And so once you make your moves in February, that's a playoff move. These aren't playoff moves overall. You got to get to the playoffs first. We got to see if Reed Shepard and Rob Dillingham, those guys can contribute first. If I'm Minnesota, I am giving serious consideration to starting Dante DiVincenzo because Anthony Edwards is your primary playmaker as it is. The ball is in his hands and enjoys his hands. I would rather start games with the younger player, the bigger player, the guy who is going to be, counted on to make shots. And I would put Conley and Dillingham in a competition. Whereas if Conley wins it, then cool. He held off the young fella. But if the young fella wins it, he clearly had to be better to play over Mike. I think if Minnesota has options to determine who their best players are, and I'm very interested to see how Chris Finch decides on that. There is decline when it comes to guys like Mike Conley. Guess what? Mike Conley and Kevin Durant, pretty sure they were in the same draft, Bobby. You know what I'm saying?
And Al Horford.
Mike's been healthier than KD has been. And, that's my concern with the Rockets too. Like when Kevin's there, I think they're going to be powerful. But Kevin is a lot to miss at least a couple weeks in the season. And with the West being a week-to-week conference as far as how teams move up and down, I'm interested to see what that offense is supposed to look like if one of Fred VanVleet, Kevin Durant, or Alperen Şengün are out, because they might have a lot of pieces. I think they should be able to keep the wheels on the track for anybody else. But, man, you take one of those guys out, their offense looks uninspiring, especially late in games. Yeah, especially the way they coach.
Playoff series. Yeah,
like they pass the ball less than anybody.
I haven't seen a team, and I think you've written about it a little bit with the double big thing there. Just make their game plan. All right, we're gonna miss. Let's just grab all the offensive rebounds.
Yep.
Which I enjoyed. I love that kind of gritty basketball, but it didn't win the series. So I'm high on them, but they're actually gonna have to go out and do it this year with a guy who, as you said, is very old at this point in Durant, but I still believe in him. We're both high on the Magic. I'd love to talk about them all day, but if we're in agreement there, I don't think we have to go too long on them. I just say this. The trade's going to look great, I think, by the end of the year. Everyone got scared of what the cost looked like on paper. I think Desmond Bane gives them exactly what they need. And, we here in Boston watch them up close, what they're capable of, what Paolo's capable of. Now, the team, again, I'd be surprised if they make the finals. I wouldn't be stunned. Wouldn't be totally stunned if Orlando's there.
Well, what needs to happen is Paolo and Franz obviously can do what they need to do to help themselves. That offense not only is an eyesore, but like they have not shown that they can elevate talent around them on that end of the floor. And so besides the fact that they need to make sure their obliques are not something we talk about next year, they also need to show that a guy like Desmond Bane won't come there and have the shooting drop that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope had last year. Like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope shot the ball really well playing next to Joker, and then he goes and plays next to Franz and Paolo, and he looks like a Laker again. So like they need to make sure that doesn't happen to Desmond. Now, the thing I like about Desmond is that he is a lot better on the ball than KCP is, so that, you trust Desmond Bane to be able to contribute more than KCP was able to. But KCP was good defensively. He just wasn't good offensively because his shot went to hell. They just got to make sure that doesn't happen with Desmond.
Definitely. And so we both had 8 teams through our first couple tiers here. I'm going to look at the big difference now because it is your Clippers coming in at number 7, who you cover. And for me, this is the biggest leap of faith I took here. I really like Dallas. I do. And maybe I'm an idiot for going down on this ship, but when the trade happened, I said, all right, you can't trade Luka. You just can't. But I really love Anthony Davis. And I know he's so sparingly healthy. I know he's on the older side here. I know it's not a perfect fit with some of the players around him right now. But I just think this team could be menacing defensively. And that's what they wanted to do. And I'm giving them no credit here because they got Cooper Flagg through the dumbest of luck. But they have Cooper Flagg now, who I really believe in. I think they're going to have Kyrie back at some point this year. So maybe I'm believing a little too much in that. And then just depth for days. Like you said, I'm giving a lot of credence to the teams with a ton of depth here. And they have so much interchangeability when you think of Gafford being able to replace any of those big guys, and PJ Washington being able to fit in here off the bench. And even the guard depth looks pretty good behind Kyrie here when you think of Clay being there still. And bringing in D'Angelo Russell and all the different moves they've made. I think they have a pretty good team here to sustain through Kyrie's absence. And then if he comes back and is himself later in the year, this could be a team that maybe if they're floating in like that 4, 5, 6 range, could make a run out of that position in the West. And it's crazy because like you look at this team, and if Luka was still there, you could probably make a case that this is a finals team. Maybe you can't make as much of a case just because you don't have like the reliability at lead ball handling, lead scoring roles here. Like they need a Luka right now. When you look at this roster, it's exactly what they're missing. Maybe Flagg will become that, but you're asking a rookie to become that now. A great rookie, maybe a transformative one, but it's still a rookie. I'm just so high on where they're going to be defensively here. And listen, I'll give it to you on the Clippers. You have them in this range. They're going to be a monster defensively again. They're going to be a much more interchangeable, versatile team, I think, with some of the pieces they've brought in exchange for Norm Powell, a couple free agents and John Collins. Brook Lopez, very underrated addition. But I think everyone's going to point to the age, injury, and playoff concerns with this group. So it's close. I mean, we could be, how many times have we watched Clippers Mavs? That could be the 4 or 5 again in the West this year.
I'm not sold on Dallas in the slightest.
I understand.
Like there's just too many guys who there's age, but then there's also like performance related, things. And I mean, you're relying on like someone's got to defend the point of attack in Dallas. And I don't know who the hell does that. If you start a certain group and then if you start another group, I don't know how those dudes are going to be locked in. Like I'm not going to trust D'Angelo Russell or Kyrie Irving next year. I don't think Kyrie comes back and is.
That's a good point. They don't have a great point of attack defender.
They don't. Like Max Christie is as close as you can get. PJ Washington is not that player, and PJ's not even going to start. Like, I watched Anthony Davis play 13 NBA seasons, and you can tell me, Bobby, how many of those teams that he's led has had a top 6 seed. It's not going to take you long. Like, you're not getting me to trust that kind of group. Like, not right now. I think they have an opportunity to be good, but they have holes everywhere, up and down the roster. You're asking Cooper Flagg to be Giannis Antetokounmpo, basically. Like Jason Kidd, when he got to go to the Milwaukee and get the Bucks job, he put the ball in Giannis's hands and accelerated his.
I think that's what they're going to do.
They're going to have to, because you can't ask D'Angelo Russell to do it. Like D'Angelo was legitimately awful last year. Klay Thompson, if that shot's not going down, like it's really rough having Klay out there. Like Klay is not exactly a winning player at this stage of his career. Derek Lively's already hurt. He's already going to be recovering from another surgery, and he misses time every year. It's those things where it's like, who do I think is going to not hold up physically? I don't trust that Dallas. I think Dallas is going to put themselves in a situation that they were in post Luka trade. Anthony Davis, man, when he's out there, it looked great, and then Anthony Davis didn't even finish his first game in uniform. And
by comparison, you had Dallas.
You got to scroll
19.
You got to scroll
yeah. You have them in Celtics Pacers land.
It's. I don't think the West is unforgiving, and
when you're missing games, that many games for key guys, you're right. It can make a shift in how
it's going to be
finish.
Cooper Flag and a bunch of dudes who you're praying hold up. And if they hold up for an extended, the ceiling's high with Dallas. I will say that
it's a playoff thing for me. I guess maybe
but
I'm considering playoff more.
The floor is a mess with that team on both ends of the floor.
Definitely. We're about to get into the middle tier here, which is packed. And it's why it's really hard for me to predict where the Celtics are going to be here. But I want to give a shout out quick to Prize Picks. In the summer, it's a great time to go over to Prize Picks and see what's going on the baseball field. You got Ohtani, you got Judge, who's hurt right now. So you're going to have to look at some of the directions right now in terms of the stars in the league. You got Lindor across town. There's a lot of different options you can go with here. Some Boston players are starting to get going a little bit here. As the deadline approaches. So a lot of different stuff you can look at over here. And the deal over at Prize Picks, 2 or more players, more or less on their stat projections, home runs, hits, doubles, anything. And you have your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. And women's basketball going on right now as well. I'm hoping Caitlin Clark's going to be back soon, but you got Asia Wilson, you got Angel Reese, you got Anescu. You got a lot of different stars playing right now. And again, you can build a daily fantasy team every day over there. And that's what they've done over at Prize Picks. They've made daily fantasy sports accessible. Ball, there's plenty of time this summer to build a women's basketball daily fantasy team over here. And what I love about Prize Picks too, you can mix and match sports. So you can put an Ohtani in your lineup and an Angel Reese. You can mix and match different sports. You got baseball, esports, basketball going on right now as well. Before long, you'll have football as well, which I'm excited for. And best part about that is you can build a different team every week over on Prize Picks. But we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. They got the Flex Play on Fridays, Flex Friday. Today is Taco Tuesday as we record this, with discounts on several projections across the board, usually by 15 to 25%. And so go over there and check it out. They're doing free squares all the time, discounts, promos, all kinds of stuff like that over on Prize Picks. Again, you have a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. And when you sign up with the code CLNS, get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So let's get into these middle tiers here now. And to me, you got your Warriors, you got your Lakers floating around in this area. I don't feel great about a lot of those teams, just health-wise, the Lakers in particular, all the stuff floating around them going into this year. You have the Pistons in this range. An interesting team to me, one that I think can get in the range of being feisty in the East, go an extra round this year. I definitely don't see them winning the East, especially with some of the roster turnover they have here. Warriors, Lakers aren't teams I quite see winning the West, but yeah, and if that Warriors team was healthy last year, who knows what happens in that series, in round 2. And I like some of the additions it looks like they're poised to make. Horford can reinforce Green a little bit. Butler now for a full season. He and Curry can help each other sustain. That team, it's just like, can they get to the finish line? And so out of all these middle tier teams I'm looking at for you, and I guess it makes sense that you have them number 9 here. I had them 11th on my board. And I guess we can talk about the Hawks for a second here after this, but Warriors feel like that team out of all of these, and maybe you feel this way about the Clippers. if things click a certain way, they catch a break or two, I could see Warriors/Clippers sneaking into the finals. I'd be really surprised, but I think there's a chance either of those teams can get in. I'd be stunned if the Lakers got into the finals.
Yeah, here's the thing, because obviously all these teams are in the same division: Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, and everyone will always gravitate towards the Warriors and the Lakers because in the Lakers case, they won some titles in Minneapolis, and in the Warriors, and then in the Warriors case, they won some titles with Kevin Durant on the team. So you're always going to look and be like, I've seen them do it before, so I think they can do it again. The Clippers won't ever get that benefit of the doubt, nor should they, because to win a title, you need to win 4 playoff series, and I mean, 4 playoff series is not something that James Harden teams or Kawhi Leonard teams have done in the last 5 years. So they need to reestablish, and that's hard to do in the playoffs. But I think the Clippers they had holes going into this offseason, and they patched all of them,
Yep.
And when it comes to the Warriors, it's funny. People will note the Clippers' age as far as dudes who aren't going to start. Former starters who won't start. But then you look at the Warriors, and their big 3 is literally 3 guys 35 and older, and Curry and Butler and Draymond Green.
Now they have Horford, who's 38.
Right. And the thing with Horford is there's still a chance that Al could start or not, and it's like the Clippers don't have 3. Their 3 most important players aren't all 35 and older. They have one guy 35 and older that they might have to start, and that's James Harden. And they've done a whole lot to Harden-proof this roster. Not enough. You're still going to be relying on him. You have to anticipate some decline after the workload James had. He had a workload that only 30-some players in NBA history have had at that, age in a season. But the Warriors, the thing that blew up their playoffs last year was Stephen Curry's hamstring. It's like, I got news for you. That stuff doesn't get easier as you get older. Stephen Curry is
still a
small
top-heavy
guard who will be 38 next spring. They are top heavy. But the thing is with the Warriors, with Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond all on the floor, they do complement each other incredibly well. They are. Yeah. I believe in the Warriors more than the Lakers because I believe that the Warriors will defend, and I don't believe the Lakers will defend.
Horford can still defend, man.
That is
a high level.
That's why I got the Lakers outside my top 10 right now, because I feel like they got some good fortune with how their games went last year. You look at their point differential.
That whole run, and it was just like, how is this happening? Especially the defensive thing. Remember that stretch where they were number 1 in defense?
There was a stretch where they were like, yeah, we're just going to have guys that we want shooting to shoot, and they weren't getting cooked by it. But then Julius Randle happened in the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? So, I was like, of course the Lakers are going to beat the Timberwolves. They got, that matchup. And Luka, we saw him against that same team. But we also saw, they panicked. That was one of the most – out of all the coaches in the playoffs, I think JJ panicked the most,
Yep. We've never seen anyone do what he did, really.
Exactly. And then there are still people who are around that team who want to act like that was justifiable. So, and then it was the funniest thing. They get DeAndre Ayton and everyone's like, look, they replaced Jackson Hayes. And then a week later, Jackson Hayes is back. Nobody circled the block like that. So, Marcus Smart can only do so much. And Marcus Smart on the court means someone else can't play. It's just going to be the bottom line is Austin Reeves, Luka Doncic, and LeBron James. And if you want to throw out Ayton as a clear
Ayton's got to play.
You got to play those guys. And that is just asking for leaks left and right. Transition.
And then you just have this LeBron
inside,
thing.
outside. Yeah, they literally have a dude who is, how hard it is to lose an offseason? You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying the Lakers have lost an offseason. I think the Lakers have done a decent job with what they needed to do. The Lakers aren't losing because of personnel moves. I'm not a big Ayton fan, but I'd rather have DeAndre Ayton than Alex Len. That's how you have to look at these things. I'd rather have Marcus Smart than Shake Milton, or Jordan Goodwin. I would rather have Dorian Finney-Smith than Jake LaRavia. You're not going to sell me on that. A bunch of
The
these
Finney-Smith
dudes are
thing was
back.
a killer.
Yeah, it's a vibe killer because it makes you think, what are they doing in the front office that made that dude want to bounce like that? You know what I'm saying? And then now you got LeBron. It's the same situation. It's like
I forgot to mention him in
Luka,
Houston, by the way.
Luka, you're fine with Luka. Luka's going to, either he's on the team. That's all it. Whether he signs the extension or not, that's
he's going to
neither
get
here
them
nor
through the
there.
regular season. It's just like last year, they're the 3 seed, and then they flamed out pretty bad.
Yeah,
and the
your
roster's a
second-
little better, but it's generally the same complexion as you're saying here.
Your
The
second
Clippers
best player
roster,
is LeBron. Like that's the challenge.
right? And the Clippers roster, to me, like the interesting thing is, it is a different complexion. Like Harden proofing it. You got Paul. I hope Paul is not arriving here a year too late. The 82 games, everything he's done the last couple of years. Like, when is it gonna fall off a little bit here? And if he's gonna start, I have some questions.
He's
about
not starting.
that.
He's not
Okay.
starting.
So that's a little better to me.
He might not even play some nights.
Okay. So then you got Beal, who I think we've probably gone a little too far on bashing and saying that he's done. I think the numbers when he's played have been decent, but the playoff performance there a couple of years ago was not. And he's just been hurt a ton. And so I like the pickup because I think it's a viable option to fill some of the Powell minutes / role that they gave up in trading him for Collins. But I don't think he's going to be Powell. And that, to me, I guess similar to Detroit here, like Detroit lost Beasley for different reasons. And I just wonder how that's going to affect the dynamic of that team, even though they brought in some different players who can do some things to fill in for him. Similar deal here with the Clippers to me, where like they move on from Powell. He was so great for them last year. Collins comes in, who, like, if you're just talking about value, I think Collins coming back for Powell is a decent return. But in terms of like this roster and how it's actually going to fit together, I don't know about Collins in place of Powell. Like, I guess he's going to play the four.
I don't look at
roster.
it like that. I don't look at it like that. I look at Brad like what you had initially. Bradley is replacing Norm. John Collins is replacing Amir Coffey. That's the place where it's like you are going from a wing who can shoot it really well, but really doesn't do anything else at a high level. I would say Amir did a great job in transition, scoring on the fast break. Well, now you got a guy in John Collins who he shoots it really well for a power forward. And
he's got to shoot it again. I think he popped off last year from 3. He's got to do it again.
I think it's been 2 years now that because he was terrible his last year in Atlanta. He was dealing with the finger. But his 2 years in Utah, he recovered his shot, and that was huge. If John Collins does not have the same value on this roster, because the Clippers, one of the reasons they've never really had athletic fours is because they are a skill-slanted team. You know how that is because that's how the Boston Celtics are for a lot of these guys. They are skill slanted rather than let's just get some athletic dudes who can possibly be something. Like John is actually a mixture of both. He's athletic size with enough skill to contribute, and that's the thing with the Clippers. It's like, who did they lose and who is in their place? Brad is got big shoes to fill because Norm wasn't putting up great numbers once Kawhi got back to a high level. But when Kawhi was out, Norm had 9 of his 30-point games. Brad had one 30-point game the entire season last year. The entire year. And you can't put that on, he was playing with this guy. And it's like, no, his one 30-point game came in a blowout loss in Toronto with Book and KD. We know Book and KD especially KD missed a good amount of time last year, and Brad wasn't able to do anything really in that time as far as being a high-level scorer. And the biggest issue, and you alluded to this, is Bradley's health. If Brad's going to continue to miss time, you can't contribute to the Clippers or anybody for that matter. That's the number one thing. Brad's got to get healthy. But Brad is here, and the one thing Brad does better than Norm is handle and pass the basketball. Like, that is what the Clippers need, and that will help all of their lineups. That'll help Harden, a turnover machine last year, but an all-NBA turnover machine nonetheless. The Clippers They addressed the things that they needed from a complementary roster standpoint. And this is a team that played Kawhi Leonard 37 games, none of them coming before January. The opportunity for them to be better than they were last year is right there.
Yeah, definitely. And they were pretty good last year, especially
They
defensively.
were pretty
and I
good
think
last
they have
year.
the
It helps to
pieces.
start there.
Yeah. And again, I think you're putting this more in a regular season direction. I do think they have the pieces to be a phenomenal regular season team again. Just what's going to sustain to the playoffs or translate to the playoffs in particular there. And that's been the question with them for a while. And I like shaking things up a little bit, which they did here for money reasons or whatever else, roster reasons. So I'm interested to see what the different dynamic is. And I love the Chris Paul full circle thing here too. Beal get some redemption potentially. I think there's a lot of stuff that's different here. And sometimes it is nice to just shake it up a little bit. Real quick, you have the Hawks 13. I have them 9. I'm super high on them. I think they can be a top 4 team in the East. I felt high on them for a while, so maybe again I'm holding on to something that I shouldn't here.
Well, why do you why do you feel so secure with the Atlanta Hawks?
I think Jalen Johnson, when he's been available, has made them a different team, and you saw it at the start of last year. So I'm hoping he'll be available for the length of this season. I've been waiting for a long time for Okongwu to get the chance to start, and now he gets that. I think that's going to change the dynamic a little bit.
How's O going to start on that team?
I think he's going to have to shoot like he did late in the year. He's going to have to improve defensively just a little bit.
But I'm saying, like, when you say start, do you mean like in the starting lineup?
Yep.
And so my question is, like, they got Porzingis now. So where does he start?
Porzingis isn't going to play every night. So that's a opportunity and a problem because there's going to be a lot of nights where they need 2 centers and they don't have to. So from a regular season standpoint, that's definitely a concern for them. Now, Mo Gay, they've like that, last year, worked the spots. Johnson, maybe, slide over, go a little smaller. They're going to have to figure out some stuff in that front court for sure. But I love the year Risa had. I obviously love the year Daniels had. And I think Trey tilted in the direction of making it work a little bit more. Losing LeVert, bringing in like a Kennard and Alexander Walker. We'll see how that shakes out. But I love the Porzingis edition. I'm hoping he's past whatever he went through last year. Because if he resembles that player, there's going to be a disaster. But if all goes right here, this is a team that I don't think is in the finals mix, but is in the East finals mix to me.
Man, you can't get me excited about Atlanta, dude. Like, Trae Young's been there for what, 7 seasons.
The roster complexion has started to change.
They've never won more than 43 games with Trae. The 1 year that they won a playoff series. We about to see, because Trae, I don't think wants that. Like, what would make Trae happy and undistracted is paying him now, and the Atlanta has a lot of reasons not to do that, but it's a risk.
I wouldn't.
And at the end of the day, I do. I don't fight anything Atlanta's done. I don't think any of their moves are something that I look at and it's like, oh, that was a questionable pickup. I actually think the moves that they made were either good or defensible. Their best player is Trae Young. Their best player is a player who averaged 4.7 turnovers per game and shot 41% from the field and is small and not the best athlete. That guy is going to play 35 minutes a night. And you need to have a bunch of dudes who can complement that when he's there. And you got to hope that, Trae's been reasonably healthy, but you got to hope that holds up. And there's always something that's stupid that happens in Atlanta. And
I know.
Benefit of the doubt is something I can't give them. Like, I like Nikhil, and tell me, Bobby, if Nikhil Alexander-Walker didn't change teams, would you be as excited about Nikhil Alexander-Walker? I feel like guys get over discussed when they are free agents who are possibly going to change teams.
I've never been the biggest fan of him. I liked him in college, and I don't think he became the player I totally envisioned, but he started to go in that direction over the last year or so here. So
Yeah,
maybe
like,
he's turning a corner.
I like Nikhil a lot, but as a different, I think he's a solid player. I don't think he's a needle mover in really any way. Like, I compare him to a guy like Terrence Mann, who they traded for and traded away, and it's like, dude, if Nikhil averages double figures in Atlanta next year, it'll be the first time in 4 years. You know, like, he's a good shooter, but he's also a guy who, you know, in the playoffs, we just watched come under 40% the last 2 years in Minnesota. Like, the best version of Nikhil Alexander-Walker is a solid but not spectacular defender and a guy who will make shots and not screw up your team. That is a good piece. That is not a, oh my God, I think this is a, you know, got a team that's going to be top 3 or 4 in the West or in the East now.
So they're in the mix to be there for sure. And we get to this middle pack of teams in the East. And this is where I really have my dilemma. We texted about it yesterday. Bucks, Pacers, Celtics, Sixers, Heat. And if, you know, I know you have the Hawks behind the Bucks, but let's put them aside for now. If the Hawks end up being in that top 5, we're talking about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 here. So one of these teams falling out of the playoff mix entirely, 4 of them ending up in the play-in, and 1 team sneaking up to that top 6 and getting in the playoffs. So your order was Bucks, Hawks, Pacers, Celtics, Sixers, Heat, which I think is fair. Health is going to mean everything here, and that's what we came to, because I think it's just so hard to split these teams just based on what they have right now. You're given the benefit of the Bucks based on Giannis. I felt similarly. Unfortunately, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to the Sixers, which I did last year, and I'm doing to some degree this year, just because if the guys are there at the end of the year, and I know they're probably not going to be there at the start, I think they have the best roster of all these teams. And a lot of that isn't just me feeling great about Embiid and George if they can be themselves. I like the young guys they have on this team. And I think it might actually be for the best that they start the year without Embiid and George, let those guys get as right as they can, and just lean on Maxey and Edgecombe and Justin Edwards and all these, you know, Adam Bona and all these different guys who have shown flashes for them. I think Nurse thrives coaching a team like that. And I think that they can be better this year, just having a little more stability. I know it's just such a what if for them, and it's probably not even worth believing in. But to me, that's why I put them at the front of those teams. Bucks are close. You know, I think for them, it's less health and more who's actually going to show up among the role players here. And then you get to the Celtics, Pacers, and Heat. I'm giving the Celtics a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here. But man, one injury there, and it's down to 11, you know, like we say here, and you're not even in the playoffs if you're them. If they're fully healthy and can figure some stuff out among the role players, I think they're the 7 seed-ish. But, like, you texted it to me yesterday, like, there's no great ceiling with the Celtics. It's just trying to hold up that floor. And similar for Indiana, who I think actually has a little more range of reliable players there. So, like, something can go wrong there and they can reasonably survive. Like, I actually look like they're, to me, going to be able to stay above water a little bit without Halliburton because they've done it before. And then for the Heat, it's just, can they put the ball in the basket? And they really couldn't last year. And I know Powell was going in there to help with that, but it's really not that entirely different of a roster. So, again, you had Bucks, Pacers, Celtics, Sixers, Heat. I had Sixers, Bucks, Celtics, Heat, Pacers. And I'd probably flip the Pacers above the Heat on second thought.
Yeah, as you said, for me, not too complicated with the Bucks. Yeah, if Giannis is there, they have a bunch of dudes who we make fun of, I guess, when it comes to basketball discussions, but they're fairly
What's their
deep
starting
team.
five to you?
In Milwaukee, I would go with Porter, Trent, Kuzma, Giannis, and Miles Turner. Obviously, Miles is a lock, and I think those 3 perimeter spots are up for competition. But the competition, you're going to land. My thing with the Bucks is they've got 10, 11 NBA players, depending on how you feel about Gary Harris. Like Gary hasn't done much in recent years.
Yeah.
His
He's probably going
body.
to do what he did in Orlando mostly.
Yeah, and that's why I've got Gary Harris as a third stringer. Ryan Rollins. Actually, you should
like
count
Rollins.
Ryan Rollins in that. Some of these dudes aren't going to play. Like Cole Anthony probably doesn't play a lot. But at the same time, it's like you have, that team has a lot of guys. They don't have any star level talent outside of Giannis. Now that's going to be, but that also opens Giannis up to having a Jokic year from 2023. Not 2023, 2022. Like,
so what seed were they last year? They
were the 5, but barely, because it was the Pacers and the Bucks were neck and neck the whole year.
I think it's fair to think that they could be in a similar position.
Yeah, like Giannis is still Giannis, and
I like Detroit over them though. I do.
If it was if they had a star of just a slightly lower tier, I would be much more down on the Bucks. But it's Giannis.
Yeah.
Like Giannis,
but it's also if he goes down,
be a force, man.
They're down to that bottom of this group, like almost automatically.
Yeah, they're going to be. The floor is perilous with the Bucks. There's not much of a ceiling, but the Bucks of all those teams have the clear-cut best player, and that's where it is with me. And not just the best player, but a guy who I think is going to play a reasonable number of games. Boston has an issue with that. Indy has an issue with that. Philly has multiple issues with that. And the thing that concerns me with Philly is a lot of people have been talking about their guard talent and how exciting that is. Their front court talent is deeply uninspiring. And the thing with all those guards is they all have their issues as far as how many of those guys can play together. Like Edgecombe's a rookie. Maxey is great, but Maxey is a dime a dozen star. In other words, a small guard who you have to be concerned with for a number of reasons. Efficiency when he has to do too much off on that end of the floor without certain guys. And then he's a small guard who is not a top defender. You have to hide him. That complicates things for Jared McCain because Jared McCain is basically the same kind of player.
Well, the younger guys aren't much of a defender.
So, I mean, Edgecombe is great because he is a guy who you think will be able to defend, but I cannot stress enough, he is a rookie coming into the NBA. He will lead, he will make mistakes, and mistakes by young players who have to play a lot generally lead to issues that hurt you chances of winning games.
And again, so the record we have with them a year ago is being awful. They were
and not just awful, but Nick, I like Nick Nurse. Nick is not the kind of head coach that gets the most out of a shorthanded roster. We saw it in Toronto. When that team was bad, they were not just really bad, but the vibes were bad too. And Philly is
a weird
vibes team.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, you want to say, hey, look, if Joel and Paul are out there, then yeah, Philly has a ceiling that a lot of these East teams do not have. Simple as that. Because that's what you do. When a general manager puts a team together, it's, hey, what's the best version of this team? But the reality is a coach has to go in there and be like, so how are we going to get through the weekend?
And that's so devastating. And I got to account for that too, because when you just show up and you don't know what's going to be there, and he would, again, the bad vibes thing you're talking about, he would just show up and say that, like, we don't know, like that was his whole demeanor last year is we don't know who's going to be here tonight. And it's hard to imagine that not being the case this year, given where those guys are health-wise to start this season. And even if it's just two guys, those are two crucial guys. And there's nothing you can really do about that if you're them. And you got to make that work if you're the coach, and they didn't last year. So I guess I should just base it more off that. But like you said, this is a year where someone should be able to break through, and we should be having that conversation with them, and we're not because of obvious reasons. So for the Celtics and Pacers, and the Heat, I'll put to the side for a second. It's tough, right? Because we have a lot of examples, in that East Finals a couple of years ago. I think is a pretty good one of Pacers without Halliburton figuring it out. Carlisle, I think, is a coach that even in that game 7, they figured it out for a couple quarters and kept it close. It's different when it's for a whole year, but the Celtics are in that same spot. And the biggest fear I have with the Celtics was a couple. We've never seen them without Tatum for even like a month. And now we're talking about a whole season where they just have to figure out everything that he did. And we're going to see it like game by game. And throughout this whole year, you're going to be like, oh man, you can't do that because Tatum's not here. And you can't do that because he's not. Just all the different ways he fills the gaps for you and just covers all these different areas. You're going to be, even the rebounding. Like, I think that's like the most simple thing. They're going to struggle to rebound this year. And he covered up so much of that. And so his loss alone, like when we're having a MVP conversation every year, he's always on the edge of that list. And we're just like, all right, Tatum's there. But they're actually going to start to feel it, right? All right, this is why Tatum's there at that 4 or 5 MVP spot every single year, because he does all these things. And Jalen, like, it's a great player to have in his place, certainly. Like, there aren't many more players you'd rather have stepping into that role this year. And I'm really excited to see him try to do it. If he can play 70 games, 70, 75 games, I think that goes a long way toward having them be in that 6-7 range in the East. And maybe even exceeding expectations beyond that if he's able to play that many games. But what are you doing on the nights where he's not there? And he didn't play a ton last year. He was in like the 60s or maybe high 50s. White, there's a lot more on him. And I actually think among all the players on this roster, I probably have the least amount of concerns with him because I think we've seen him step up into a bigger spot before and do more. Center. And it's funny because, again, like Pacers, Celtics are almost in the exact same spot. Who's playing center for these teams? It's a massive question on both sides. I like the Jay Huff edition in Indy. I like the Neemias Queta, but those guys haven't had to start an entire season yet in their careers. Even the 4 spot with these teams, you're like, all right, Neesmith's there, Toppin's there in Indy, you got Hauser and Yang in Boston.
The 4 spot in Indiana is absolutely
Siakam, right?
secure.
Yep.
Boston has an issue at the 4.
Boston's got the issue at the 4. Indy, it's more, the depth at that 3 spot and what you're getting at that minus Halliburton. So I want to put the Celtics over the Pacers here. I think you had the Pacers over the Celtics, right?
Yeah. The Pacers have less to worry about than Boston does. Like Boston,
I think that's certainly fair. This is how I'll describe it. The Celtics have the better 1-2 to me, White and Brown, compared to Siakam and Nembhard, I guess. Indy's got like 3, 4, or well, I'd actually put Pritchard in that conversation too. I think 1 through 3, Boston's got the better top end, and I think Payton's going to be amazing this year. I think it's going to be mind blowing how good he is. But for Indy, like 4 through 8, I'll give them. And I don't know how that shakes out. These teams might have the exact same record at the end of the year.
Yeah, I feel pretty decent about Indiana because Jay Huff is the biggest question mark. I would start Jay Huff, and I would just
Me too.
Figure out, like, the thing is, Jay Huff went undrafted because
he's really good, though.
The idea of what he could possibly do, it's like, can he hold up over extended minutes? Because he's rarely been asked to do that. Like, he's, there are athletic concerns, even though he dunks like an animation, you know what I mean? Like that. But if you talk about threes and rim protection, you can approximate that, and it's just a big question mark. Hey, can he hold up athletically, with teams going at him as in first units? But that's the only real, Andrew Nembhard is a guy I'm excited to see how he steps up into a bigger role. And there's plenty of support there, like There are other guys who can handle the ball, create their own shot. Benedict Mathurin is playing for money. That can go in a number of different ways. You're still going to have a pretty good second unit between TJ McConnell, Ben Shepherd, Obi Toppin,
They have
Cheris
a
Walker.
lot of depth.
You have guys, you know what I mean, and then top it off with Rick Carlisle being the guy who has to figure it out. I don't think, like I said, I think their ceiling is non-existent, but in this year's Eastern Conference, I think they're going to be competitive. Now, Jaylen Brown is the most interesting part of the Celtics to me. I covered the Clippers when Kawhi Leonard underwent ACL surgery that was going to keep him out of the 21-22 season. And it was like, all right, Paul George, it's your team, which Paul had not had that responsibility. Undisputed, you're the guy, and you have to be the guy since he left Indiana, because his 2 years in Oklahoma, he had Russell Westbrook. The first year, it was Carmelo. And then, like, he gets to the Clippers, and not only is it with Kawhi, but Kawhi was able to play while Paul was recovering from shoulder surgery. Jaylen Brown is entering that same exact circumstance. Now, T. Lue, I mean, a lot of people like to hate on T. Lue, but, like, T. Lue lost PG that Christmas, that December, and that team still found a way to win 42 games in that Western Conference. And so this is about Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown missed more games last year than any other year in his 9-year career. The
Coming
Boston
off a
cannot
meniscus surgery.
exactly. Boston can't afford that. They gotta, I do think the floor, their roster is deeply uninspiring right now. I do think a guy like Ben Simmons makes sense for the Celtics because he gives them
All
an
right.
extra ball handler, some size. Look at their 4-5 position right now. It's deeply uninspiring. It's Niang. It's guys like Garza. I got Josh Minot as my backup 4 on that team. Xavier Tillman is still on the roster. I think he might be in the mix or something. They need a guy. I don't think they even have, I think they have an open spot for a 14th guy. So they do need to sign another contributor. And so they've pared this thing down. They are losing a lot more than just Tatum, Horford gone, Drew gone, Kristaps gone. That's 4 rotation players from last year. Indy's only losing 2 in Turner and Halliburton. So there's just a lot more that Boston has to make up than Indiana. And I think there's a big line between Indiana and Boston, even though that line is only represented by one spot in my power rankings.
Yeah, for sure. And like, let's do the worst case scenario of this for Boston. Like, Bucks.
You don't want to do the worst case scenario. Why would you do that to yourself?
There is a worst case scenario, so I guess this isn't that. But let's say a realistic scenario where Bucks,
dude, they can lose 60 games. That's your worst case scenario,
right? If things go sideways injury wise, but a realistic scenario is one where Bucks are over them, Pacers, Heat here, Sixers, and again that puts you at 11. And Chicago, then you're talking like Chicago, Toronto. Do they have like the best versions of their seasons? And then all of a sudden you're in like 12, 13. You're not going to be in 13 conversation, but like 11, 12's in play here in a bad version of this season for Boston, and not like an unrealistically bad version of the season for them, because these other teams have some decent best case scenarios between Milwaukee, Pacers figuring some things out. Miami's just solid. Like, again, I have offensive concerns about them, but they're bringing in Hero, Bam, Powell's that, adding to that group, and they didn't really give up anything to get them. They've been in that playing mix for a while here, and there's no reason to think that they won't be this year, barring something really bad happening. And, there's hope for more stability there without the Jimmy stuff hanging over their head. And the coach is great. You've said it yourself, like, this is a big year for Joe if they're going to try to remain competitive. He's going to have to figure a lot of stuff out. And on the Simmons thing, we talked about it on a couple of podcasts now here. I have never been a Simmons fan ever. And so I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I'm for it too. And I actually think he makes a lot of sense here. They're trying to play more up tempo. They need someone to rebound. He can actually play a pretty considerable role here. Maybe even ends up a starter by the end of the year if things go right. And there's still, parts of his game that are going to be so frustrating, but there's a wide open spot for him here. You said it, for him to fill a lot of different things they need right now. And how much do they actually want to fill those needs? I think that's going to be a big question, how much they're intending to go into this year competing, because it almost makes too much sense. And I know the Kings are floating around. There's some other teams that might have some interest here, but to me, there's no team that makes quite as much sense as Boston does for him. And
just look at the
I
front
feel like
court.
they've had interest in him for a
They just
while.
need another guy. They
Yeah.
just need another guy in that front court, man. Like right now, I got Luka Garza as the first guy off the bench.
And I like Luka Garza, but we have no idea. We have no idea with Kada. We have Amari Williams, I don't think is ready. So, like, they just need another guy there in that front court mix. And I know Charles Bassey looked good in Summer League. That's not a different skill set from what they already have. Simmons brings something that they don't quite have, like a passing, rebounding, floor running center. And it makes a lot of sense.
As someone who got to be up close with Ben for 2 months,
So this is what I wanted to hear from you, what the experience of covering him was like.
Yeah. Ben was a free agent for the first time in his whole career, like in the middle of the season. And before he had a tweak in his knee shortly after All-Star break, he was playing great. Like, he defended everybody. He gave you lineup versatility. He is a smart basketball player. That's the thing with Ben Simmons. He might be a reluctant basketball player in terms of putting the ball in the basket, but I think his first dozen games or so, I think he had something like a Mahomes related to touchdown interception ratio. Like, his assist to turnover ratio was sparkling. Like, he just made every good decision. He pushed the pace. He understands his role. He doesn't shoot threes, but he generates threes. That is going to be highly valuable to someone like Joe Mazzulla, as far as someone who defends, gets out in transition, and knows who his shooters are and where they need to get their shots from. He can play the 1, he can play the 5. Like, he's just in the regular season, especially as a guy you're not relying on as a, starter, like, he's a good player to have on your team. In the playoffs, when certain things get put under the microscope, that's why the Clippers had to move away from him as that series against the Nuggets went along. The Celtics shouldn't have to worry about playoff Ben Simmons, because
that's
they ain't
exactly
guaranteed no playoffs.
Right.
You got to get through the regular season.
And I never wanted anything to do with him in the past for 2 reasons, or 3, I guess. One, the conversation at one point was trade Jalen for him, which I never entertained. The salary was ridiculous for a while for who he was. And relying on him on a winning team to actually fill a consistent role, I just didn't believe in. This team is not going to be competing for a championship. And who knows how much they're competing, period. So why not try him out for a season and just see how it goes? And maybe you're the team that finally revives him to some degree, just because he's able to play with so much freedom and not many expectations. But at this point, the question with him is how often he can play, as it has been for a little while now.
Yep. That's why you don't want to start Ben Simmons, because you need lineup consistency. And it's been a while since Ben has consistently played back-to-backs. And I don't think you should, I don't think you can really, unless you're talking about a Kawhi level player, I don't think it's a good idea to have a guy in your starting lineup who you have to take out of your starting lineup as often. So it's nothing official, obviously, but I do think that with roster spots drying up, there's a clear need for player and team. There's a clear match there.
Definitely. And I hope it happens just from an interest standpoint. I want to see them get loaded from an interest standpoint. That didn't happen. And I think this is an interesting storyline if it does end up happening here. So we'll scroll through a few more teams before we get out of here. Again, this middle pack, to me, it's Pacers, Heat, Celtics, Bucks, Sixers. Going to be the big swing in the East from 6 to 11. You obviously have the Hawks in that conversation too, which I think is fair, just based on how they performed recently. Going down your list, you have Warriors, Pistons, Lakers, Bucks, Hawks, Grizzlies. You're a little higher on than me. We'll see how healthy they are this year and how some of these other pieces that have gone in and out work for them. I think this is going to be a step back year for them, but they've been pretty consistent over the years in terms of regular season. So I understand that. Heat, Mavs, Spurs. You have at 20. I have the Spurs, I guess, in your Grizzlies range,
Hmm.
popping up to where did I have the Spurs? 14, actually. I think the Spurs are going to take a leap this year. I'm really excited to see Fox and Wemby for a full year. The wing depth to me isn't as inspiring. Someone's really going to have to step up there. But I think that if they're fully healthy this year, stuff's finally going to come together. I'm really excited to see the Luke Victor Kelly Olynyk thing that they're going to try at center there.
They
I
got
think
so many
Luke's a great
Celtics
fit.
on that team. God damn.
I think this is their year finally, and I just really hope. I don't know how much we've even heard about Victor's health at this point. I guess he's ready to go.
Yeah,
I
he's
just
ready to
hope
go. He's cleared. I mean, that dude's been shading Karl Malone and becoming a Shaolin monk this offseason. Like Victor Wembanyama, I don't think
this
he's the
guy's
least
too
of
good for this team to not
this.
be good this year. And he's
I
got Fox, and I think
here's
there's a
my
lot there
thing.
now.
I think the idea of them improving is what people are like, oh yeah, San Antonio's got to take a leap, like because of Wemby. It's like Wemby is that guy defensively. Offensively, he's not. And he has the potential to be that guy as soon as next year, but we got to see it. And I'm not confident that he is surrounded by the players that will help him get to that point. It's great that they got the number 2 pick. You always want to get the highest pick possible. And they picked the guy that was, the consensus second best player in the draft, but it's not a fit that I love. Someone is not going to have the ball and someone's not going to start. And there's a lot of shooting concerns in that group. Like De'Aaron Fox, for all the things that he does well, is not the strongest shooter. Do you start Stephon Castle next to him, a guy who you can look at Stephon Castle's shooting last year? Yes, he was the rookie of the year. It was the rookie of the year in one of the worst draft classes of the 21st century. Like, do you start him or do you start Dylan Harper, a guy who, again, I said this with VJ Edgecombe, is a rookie? You know what I mean?
I truly have no idea what Harper's bringing, which is obviously a big question here.
And that's the biggest question for San Antonio. They have a lot of options. Figuring out, one, who the best fits are, and two, if they're going to be good enough to get the most out of everybody there. Because, again, Wemby's your best player, and we're talking about a lot of ball handlers and a lot of dudes who, if they don't have the ball, I have concerns with. I think that
That's a fair point.
I think, especially in the West, especially because these guys do not have a foundation of winning, I think there's a lot of questions about how soon they figure it out and how good they can get before the standings kind of take a firm hold.
There's definitely a low floor with them that we've watched for a couple of years now, but I think there's just so much incoming talent. Castle did what he did last year. There's definitely a role thing to figure out. That might be a rocky start for them.
I don't even think it's a lot of incoming talent, to be honest with you. I think it's just Dylan. I mean, Luke and Kelly are good
Fox
players.
is that because he wasn't there for the whole year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say De'Aaron, I would be more. It would be. It's just that all the talent coming in is like not complementary talent. That's my biggest thing. Luke is going to be a good backup center, and their best player is a center.
He's the definition of complimentary player.
I'd rather have Luke Cornett than Bismack Biyombo, if that's what you're asking me.
I'm excited about that double big combination. The defensive ceiling here is pretty high. Offensively, you're right. There's a lot of questions. Grizzlies, same deal. Like, I just don't even know who's going to be available there on any given night. That's why I'm pretty low on them.
Durability is already a concern because Edie won't be starting the year. Jared Jackson Jr. is going to be in a race to start the year. John Moran is
never available.
A weekly status check. The thing with the Grizzlies, though, is let me just say, like, I will always give John Morant credit for winning when he's on the floor. You saw what happens when he's not there, and it's a good thing that Ja right now is, not suspended or injured. Like, he's going to have his issues, but I'm always going to give Ja Morant credit for being a winning player. In the playoffs, he's not. But in the regular season, when that dude's on the floor, like I trust John Morant more than a lot of people do. And I mean, I'm at the point where I would trust John Morant more than De'Aaron Fox. That's a crazy thing to say, but like John Morant gets out there and his teams are going to win at least until the playoffs start. De'Aaron's played 8 NBA seasons and he's won once. So impact is something that it's like you got to see it. Like I want De'Aaron to do well. I want the Spurs to do well. I think that people want Wemby on elevated stages. They have to show that they have the pieces to do it, and they have never with this group shown that. And there's not a lot of reason to think that they will outside of Wemby.
Well, Wemby's a big one. As we get to some of the other teams here, I have the Grizzlies really low. I had them all the way down at 21. Part of the reason, and you have this team a little lower, I'm high on the Blazers this year. I think the holiday effect's real. I like the chance for some of their players to take some steps. The younger players there, we saw it late in the year. They were at like a 59% win pace from like mid-January on. One of the top 10 defenses in the league. Offense again here. Million questions, especially with Simons out the door. And Drew is a better player than Simons, but is he available as much? He's certainly not a better player offensively at this point. And defensively, like that's like a ceiling raising type player right there. But night to night, is that the kind of guy who's like increasing your win total by a ton here? So those are some questions there, but natural growth. Is Hansen Yang going to play year one? That's a question too. Because Klingen's going to have to start, and then who knows after that with Ayton gone. There's a lot to like here down the line. Avdia was better last year. Shaden Sharp, like there's a lot of possibilities there. So I understand you being a little lower on them, but they were pretty good last year. And if that trajectory can keep going upward and Holiday's impact can rub off even in intangible ways, I like this team to take a little bit of a step and be in that play-in mix, maybe even over a Memphis that has some guys missing throughout the course of a year. So I'm going to be optimistic about Portland and what they're doing.
Yeah, they're a weird roster. I mean, they're using roster spots on. I think Yang was exciting, but
I just don't know if he's ready.
They use a first-round pick on arguably their deepest position, like even after losing Aiden, because Time Lord is still there. So
I forgot about him. I'm ashamed to say.
So you got defensive centers in Kling and Williams.
Thybulle's still there as well.
Thybulle picked up his player option. He's in their second unit. The biggest thing with Portland, and you mentioned it, their offense is going to be at best inconsistent. At worst, I could see this being one of the worst offenses in basketball. Like it's Denny Avdia and a bunch of dudes who you do not feel inspired by in the slightest. I like Drew's not a bad offensive player. It's just that like he's literally entering year 17. You're not playing through Drew Holiday. You're going to play through Denny Avdia. Denny Avdia is going to have the ball more than anyone else on that team. He's going to be who they play through. I thought Denny, once he didn't have to share the floor. Where does Scoot? I don't think Scoot starts. Like if Scoot starts, then someone making a lot of money or is just flat out better or both doesn't. And
Drew's not going to play a lot of games, so that's probably how that shakes out.
But if Drew is available, is he starting with Avdia, Kamara, and Jeremy Grant, who Jeremy was really bad last year, and Klingen? Like their offensive personnel at every position is really, really bad. I love the stretch that they had in the third quarter of the season where Ayton was out, Grant missed a lot of time, Simon started to miss time, and they defended at a high level. That's why Chauncey is still there, because he got those guys to respond and play like they cared. But he had to do it with the veterans not there. They still have a high-money veteran in Jeremy, who, again, Jeremy was, when he wasn't shooting a three, Jeremy was really rough. As much as I want to like Shaden and Scoot, they're roadblocked by veterans right now. And, Scoot just hasn't that light bulb hasn't kind of clicked where he can contribute to consistent winning basketball yet. So it's going to be weird, which is appropriate if anyone's been to Portland. Portland likes to keep things weird. So I think their defense is something I can bank on. I think they're going to defend and play hard for Chauncey, but I don't know how this team scores on a night in and night out basis.
Yeah, they're probably in that mix with some of the teams we've talked about already, maybe even a little below that. I definitely have them above, and I think you do too here. You had them at you had them 24, so you definitely have them in this mix of teams we're going to talk about next year who are on the lower end of things. We both agree in some order. Hornets, Jazz, Wizards, Nets are the tanking teams at the bottom. There's just really not a lot there on any of those rosters. Pelicans, you do have them in the bottom tier. They're always going to be interesting to some degree because there are some players here that are intriguing, but they've been there for a little while and it just hasn't shaken out to anything. Then you look at the Kings, Bulls, Raptors, Suns, and do I have an extra team in that mix? No, we're pretty much in the same agreement of teams that are like right on the edge of tanking. Among those teams, I'm a little higher on the Pelicans. I love Trey Murphy. Zion, if he's there, the ceiling's a little higher than bottom of the league. And the centers are good too. I like some of the centers they have there in the mix, including Derek Queen, who looked really good at Summer League after the controversial trade. He, of course, was hurt to start the year. People are always hurt on this team, so it's hard to believe in health. I don't like Jordan Poole there in place of CJ McCollum. So, yeah, I definitely have them in this bottom tier teams, but on the higher end of the interesting ones, I don't think the Kings are super interesting. I don't know what they're doing. The Suns, I don't know. Like, I know what they're doing. They're trying to clean up the mess that was there, but it's not looking pretty. I do like the center situation there a little bit better, though, than I did a year ago, but I don't know how much that matters. Booker's really good. You know, among all the players we're talking about in this bottom mix here, he's the best player by far. So maybe that buys them a little something. The Bulls, I think, are going to be in tank mode pretty fast here as they sort out this roster. Maybe Vucevic is gone. Finally make some trades to point in that direction. So they're not super intriguing to me. The Hornets intrigue me, but
if can I just say something? If Vooch, I've seen some things floating about Vooch possibly getting his wings. If that happens, I am very intrigued to see where that guy goes.
Was
and
he
you
in
should be
conversation last year?
No, he wasn't. Because the
little
Bulls
while.
weren't good. I mean, Vooch is always going to put up, the kind of numbers that for people who don't watch basketball at all are going to be like, oh my God. Because look, Vooch is a 40% 3-point shooter who averages a double-double. You know what I mean? At the center position. Like, if you don't watch basketball, and you're just looking at numbers, Vooch is like.
So what's your take with him?
If he gets his wings, if that guy's a free agent, I am very interested to see where he goes. Because, first of all, anyone excited for a team that showed, post All-Star break signs of life like a Toronto or a Portland? Dude, Chicago was the best of those post All-Star break showing signs of life teams. Like, Josh Giddey went from uninspiring former Thunder player to, once he didn't have to share the ball with Zach LaVine, that dude was putting up crazy numbers. And it was crazy numbers that make sense given his size and skill set, right? So, Chicago has a group of guys that already they played better for longer than those other teams at the bottom. In the bottom, I would say 12.
Yeah, I get that.
But here's the thing with Vooch. Vooch is a guy who does not fit any part of the Bulls timeline. And so he's got a year of $21 million left. I don't know who is eligible to sign him out of the buyout market if he gets bought out, if they can't trade him.
Depends when.
That dude,
if it's in season, the second apron thing comes into play.
That dude is a guy if he is on a minimum contract or something close to it, is going to help a lot of these teams that are looking at really uninspiring center situations. And that's if he's a starter for some team. If Nikola Vucevic finds himself as a backup on some team, that is massive in an offseason where Brook Lopez is going from a starter to a backup. Can't even think of anyone else because Al Horford, I know, started a lot of games, and we still got to the Golden State Warriors to have to secure that. But Nikola Vucevic is going to help some team if he is coming there as a single-digit $1 million player. I'm just going to put that out there.
I'm looking at all the teams right now. I think there's only one that makes a ton of sense. It's the Warriors. And they've obviously had interest in him for a while.
Yeah, and the
So
Warriors
you're
have
talking
interest in
Vucevic, Green,
and
Horford.
If you get both of those guys, Horford and Vucevic, it's like, yeah, like Golden State's pretty interesting, because what Golden State needs is, because Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler are not great shooters, like the only center that you can really play with those guys is the Quentin Post kind of shooters. You know what I mean? Like,
imagine him playing the post role.
Yeah. Other than that, though, like, you have to start Jimmy and Draymond at the 4 and the 5 just to make it work offensively. And that, obviously, Draymond is too small and too old to deal with that all season long. Like, Draymond will be the first to tell you he prefers to play the 4 so that he's not going up against the biggest guys for the majority of his minutes. That's a way to make it work offensively. But defensively, that's really hard on Draymond, especially at his age. Let that, if they get a guy who can shoot offensively and then just lean on guys credibly defensively, that unlocks the best version of the Golden State Warriors. And so I'm interested to see who they come out with.
So that's the scenario where the Bulls crumble to me, is you buy out of Vucevic and start.
If they don't have Vucevic, it looks rough, because now Vucevic played a lot of games. One thing about Nikola Vucevic, he is durable. And so now you go from that to Zach Collins and Jalen Smith getting elevated roles. That is asking for being bottom 5 in the East, no matter what you do.
So the last team I want to hit on here before we get out of here is Toronto, because, I mean, the stuff there, if all 5 of the starters are healthy,
it's a hell of a way to put it.
I'm just interested to see what it looks like, because we didn't see Ingram in a Toronto uniform. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this forget Brandon Ingram's on the Raptors. It seems like they tried to trade RJ Barrett, which makes sense. Celtics wouldn't take him for White. Celtics maybe wouldn't even take him for Holiday, by some of the stuff that's floating out there. So he's there. I like him. It's kind of like the thing you mentioned earlier, where in, I think, San Antonio, it's a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands, and none of the other guys are going to do a ton without the ball in their hands. So that's the big problem there. Pirtle's back. Love him. I think he's a guy that can maybe unlock any one of those players, but are all of those guys unlocked at the same time? There's not a lot of players that glue everything together for them. Like Grady Dick made some strides late in the year. Jamal Shed was playing some minutes, and they just had different guys in and out. I don't know why they traded Davion Mitchell still, but whatever. They don't look very good to me. They were really bad last year, but there is a good starting 5 here of talented players. So
they traded Davion, and they traded Davion in part because, one, they had Jamal Shed, and 2, because Davion was, he was an expiring contract, and they were able to clear something. That's the best way I can kind of couch it. It's not like Toronto got a whole lot back in that deal.
No, they got PJ Tucker, right?
Yeah, they had the right to the right to send PJ on his way. I mean, look, Toronto has a new Masai's not there for the first time in a while. And so with Toronto, to your point, Bobby, it's Darko Rajakovic has a way of how he wants to play. He is probably the biggest proponent of ball movement among the NBA head coaches. And when Toronto was starting to figure some things out, they defended extremely well. Now, the defense has a bit of a consideration, and that consideration is they couldn't tank if they wanted to the second half of the year, because they kept running up against the Wizards and the Hornets and all the teams that were just way better at losing games than they were. And so now you bring all these guys back. Not only did Ingram not play for them all year, but quickly missed a ton of time last year. someone is just not going to have the ball. And a lot of these dudes who are going to have the ball, that ball sticks. Like Brandon Ingram is not a, everyone else. Like it's either or with Brandon Ingram. Either he's going to get his or he's not going to be participating. We saw it with FIBA. You know what I mean? Brandon Ingram in elevated situations tends to disappoint. And so now that's a guy New Orleans was like, we're not paying you. We'd rather trade you. Well, now in year 10, Brandon Ingram is going to be on this team. And on one hand, he's a walking bucket, 20 points right there. On the other hand, as an offensive team fit, how does it work? And especially how does it work with a coach who wants to move the ball as much as possible?
So that's our rankings. Pretty similar. A few key differences, I'd say, like Minnesota and Houston and the Grizzlies and, the Spurs, I think, are big differences we have here. But, Blazers too. But aside from that, I think we're generally in the same place. I'm really having a hard time parsing out that Sixers, Bucks, Celtics, Heat, Pacers group. So I'm going to keep looking at that and trying to make sense of that.
Don't look too hard, man. The season don't start for another 3 months.
Yeah. I'm going to be watching some baseball before long here once I can finally take my eye off this stuff. But your thought on the Celtics from your power rankings. We'll put that in the chat. Like the Pacers, Celtics have a major Achilles tendon patient. Like the Pacers, the Celtics have lost their three-point shooting, shot blocking center to an Eastern Conference rival. Unlike the Pacers, the Celtics didn't stop there. Holiday was traded for Simons, a player who should fit Boston's three-point heavy scheme, while taking on many of Touch's Tatum vacates. I want to see Simons with the Celtics, but who also projects to tank the Celtics defense. Niang, acquired from Porzingis, may be the team's best option to start at the 4. Who starts at center? Keita. Who replaces Horford, Garza, Jaylen Brown, White, and reigning six-man Pritchard are still there, but Boston doesn't look like a team with enough reliable size, and this defense looks significantly less formidable. So that's the thing. I don't think they're going to defend as well. That's been a rock for them in recent seasons. The offense, I think, can find a way. I think there's a lot of talent remaining there on the offensive side, and if they play a little bit faster, crash the glass, and get some unforeseen contributions from a Simons or Shireman or one of the bigs off the bench, maybe you're rolling and you're humming, and maybe Brown can average 28 a game and really get you by there. I think, again, Pritchard's going to be awesome. I'd start him. There's a little Simons-Pritchard debate going on right now. I would start Pritchard and let Simons figure it out off the bench. I know there's a case for some lineup balance stuff there, but I think Pritchard's earned the right to start. I looked it up. Pritchard, White, Hauser, Brown, and Keita. Only like 50 minutes, but it's a decent, more minutes than I thought that group would have played. Had a 130 offensive rating last year. So
it's crazy to me that Simons is younger than Pritchard.
Yes. Pritchard's on the older side there with Tatum and Brown and all of them. So I don't know. We're going to keep debating this thing up to the season. As we wrap the show here, in your mind, is this going to be more of a tank year for Boston? Not that because they want to tank, but just because they end up tanking? Or is it going to be a year where they're more competitive than many people expect, and they're in that play-in mix and they're really fighting for a playoff spot, and maybe even more than that?
The Eastern Conference, man. I just feel like because
you think they can stay afloat?
I expect them to. I don't think there's even they're in my top 20. I expect them to.
Yep, they were what, 19?
No, they're like 16th.
16. So you're higher on them. I had them at 17. So pretty much the same.
Yeah, I just expect Jaylen Brown's too good. This is the opportunity that if you're Jaylen Brown, you should have won it this your whole career. Your legacy, like think about how people talk about Scottie
legacy altering year.
Yeah, like think about how people talk about Scottie Pippen just off of the year that he got to play in his prime without Michael Jordan on the team and what that did for him, as far as how people talk about not just him but Scottie. I mean, like that did a lot for Michael. People talk about Michael Jordan in terms of Scottie Pippen. How many playoff series did Michael Jordan ever win with Scottie Pippen not on his team? 0. People talk about that all the time, and they talk about that more often because Scottie Pippen was able to win one playoff series, and with the Bulls with Mike not there. So this is Jaylen Brown's time. Jaylen was drafted a year before Jason Tatum was. Brown and Tatum were never young players who had to be the number one main guy for an entire season. They got to start their careers with an Isaiah Thomas, a Kyrie Irving, a Gordon Hayward, to a lesser extent, Al Horford. Well, Jaylen Brown, this is probably your one time in your prime with this franchise to be that dude, And we're going to learn a lot about Jaylen Brown, and we're going to learn a lot about Joe Mazzulla, a guy who did not get as much credit as he should for winning a championship and keeping things afloat after Ime Udoka left.
He hasn't got an extension this summer either.
Because people thought that he was only benefiting from a special roster. His roster is anything but special right now, and he has one player who I would consider a tier 2 or above player. And so it's a big year for both of those men, and tank if you want to. It will be looked upon poorly if they underachieve.
So yeah, and that's my tanking is just not a straight path anywhere for them. Like they're still gonna have to rebuild a roster. They're still gonna. I know drafting is a big part of that, but they're gonna have to draft from wherever they're at, and even a dip into the bottom of the league, which is going to be so hard to do, doesn't guarantee you anything, as we've seen in recent years. So I'm not a tanking proponent. I actually want to see some guys develop here. I want to see some people show that they can be part of this next Tatum Brown team. And if that's not there and this thing goes sideways fast, I guess you make some decisions accordingly there. But my biggest regret from the offseason for them is that they just couldn't put a little bit of a better roster together for Brown to actually try to do this then. The center thing to me is like I wanted them to hold on to Porzingis because Brown and Porzingis had some chemistry there and maybe figure out a home for Porzingis later in the year. I wanted to see Horford stay because I think that's just a guy that can be a rock and help them keep things together. And then I thought Cornette played well off Tatum to make you think, okay, when Tatum comes back, that can be a center he plays off and starts potentially for this next version of the Celtics, whatever it is. Even if you think this is a lost year, gap year, whatever you want to call it, like you still have to figure out who's playing center after this year. And I guess there's a sense around the league that you can just go use a mid-level and find a guy. But man, their centers were here for a while and they were big parts of what they did, Horford in particular. And that's going to be tough to not only drop that much talent off of, but also try to rebuild chemistry with. And it's nice to have Keita here, who's been in the system for 2 years and I think is better than people think. But man, like this thing with them this year is going to be consistency. Brown's the number one option, so he's got to show up every night. Pritchard's going to face more defensive pressure. Can he be more consistent while facing that? These centers, particularly Keita, can he show up every night now that you're an every night player, whereas before you're just kind of filling in here or there? So that's the challenge for them. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs early in the schedule, I think. How much can they stave that off and stay afloat is going to be the question for them, because I think there's some teams that have a better idea of what they're doing night in, night out, even the Pacers, as you mentioned. So can they survive that first couple weeks there? That's going to be the big thing for them. Can they stay healthy? Because you start adding injuries to this depth that they're dealing with here, and it's going to go south fast. But I'm with you. I think they can stay afloat, and I think they should intend to try to do that this year for the sake of everybody involved. But life without Tatum's going to be tough, and I do not expect him back this year. I don't know. You holding out a little hope?
Back in terms of what?
Like on the court.
Tatum should, again, I've covered Kawhi, so you have to, because
I think everybody should. Halliburton's doing it. Lillard should. Tatum should too.
You notice that the only person that people are like saying should come back and play is Kyrie Irving, and notice the team that he plays for and the franchise that he plays for and who we're all talking about on the cover of Men's Health and whatnot. Like Kyrie Irving coming back sooner than he should when he is a older, smaller guard who also just got paid. It just is asking, like, it's not like Kyrie Irving was a beacon of durability before his ACL tear. He always had something going on.
In that same knee. multiple times.
Right. Like it would be it would just be irresponsible to bring Kyrie Irving back before he is ready. I saw Jamal Murray tear an ACL at a much younger age and never mentally feel comfortable getting back on the floor until he missed in the entire season, which was a talking point in Denver and people who were covering the Nuggets. That's why Nikola Jokic got voted MVP, because the narrative was, man, Nikola's doing this. And the whole time they wouldn't rule Jamal Murray out. This dude was warming up before games in the playoffs against the Warriors and still was like, I can't do it. I'm going to wait until next fall. Like Kyrie Irving coming back sooner than a year from an ACL tear. I mean, again, I'm not going to, question an individual's guy's will to get back to being who he was, but I will question whether it's the best thing for him.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to hold Tatum back from trying to run onto that floor in March or April if there's a chance. But
yeah, he's your franchise.
Yeah,
if you're a role player, then I'm not tripping as much. I'm only asking you to play like 20 minutes, right? But if you're a star, if you're a guy you play through, if you're a guy who needs to get back to a level where you're putting up star level production over the course of the remainder of a multi-year contract, you better take more time, not less time.
He's Law Murray. Just put the link to his power rankings in the chat, so you can go check that out here. I'll be posting mine to CLNS Media in the morning, and continue to follow along with Law as he covers the Clippers into another interesting season out there in LA, and does these power rankings, which you're going to do, as you said, throughout next season.
Hopefully I don't do another one of these until October. I'm manifesting.
I don't think
that.
much is going to change.
I need a game.
Ben Simmons ends up in Boston, you might have to tear it up and rewrite it.
Give me media day and a training camp and a preseason before I have to do this again.
I'm looking forward to it. But yep, we have a couple months here. As I've said before, we're going to go live whenever news breaks. I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know when Horford's going to sign. I don't know when Ben Simmons is going to sign. I guess there's a notion floating around that Simmons is holding up there's some other free agents that can't sign till Simmons can. I don't know what that's all about, but I've seen that floating around. Yeah, there's a couple other guys out there, Westbrook among them. So there's still some stuff to happen around the league. Kuminga's out there. All the restricted free agents are still out there, seemingly. So we'll see if there's any fireworks in August. Celtics still have to see their sale go official. They have to introduce Simons and Yang. There's still some stuff out there, but off-season's winding down, so stick with us if news does break. Don't anticipate it to anytime soon here, but if you turn on notifications, we'll be live whenever it does happen. Subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass channel. Training camp going on every day. We're doing some amazing coverage down there with our guy Taylor Kyles, Mike Cadlick, and others. Greg Bedard as well. So go follow along with them as camp continues down in Foxborough, Bruins, Rinkside, all the other channels here, NBA history. Go subscribe to all of them. And, of course, subscribe to our Garden Report Spotify feed where we put our podcast. And if there's no news, we'll maybe see you later this week, next week sometime. And appreciate Law stopping by here and talking about all these teams for a little bit. So that's it for our show here. We will talk to you sometime later this week, and we are out of here. Peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
fly Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke an hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke